What are you two working together now?
Oz is working for me.
Let's talk about the Penguin episode 3 entitled Bliss. Overall thoughts on the episode, Patrick Klepek?
I really liked this episode. I think if you want an episode that really encapsulates sort of the mania of Oz, his ability to bend himself and twist himself into different emotional knots to accomplish his goals, like this episode is sort of a tour de force on that. And like where it ends leaves me in a place I was not expecting. And I had a blast with the episode start to finish.
I thought it was a pretty good episode. I think like you learn a lot more about Vic. You learn about Vic's backstory and the way it handles Vic's arc this episode, I thought was pretty smart from a screenwriting decision standpoint. And as with many things in the show, not entirely plausible, but but from like a screenwriter, like a storytelling perspective, I'm like that was the most interesting way that could have resolved, and yeah. I liked that part of it. So let's talk about what actually happens this episode. This episode begins with a clever flashback where we meet Vic's family and his romantic interest, Graciela, and find out how the events at the end of the Batman impacted him. Specifically, we see the explosion, we see the huge flood, and his entire family was killed in the flood. I thought this was pretty clever because I'm watching this. I'm like, wait, Vic has a family? Wait, like his dad is cares about like who he spends his time with? Like, what about his dad's opinion on like Penguin? Like when his dad and then you're like, oh shit! Not only did this happen before the show, it happened during the events of the Batman, the Matt Reeves movie, which I thought was pretty clever stuff. But what do you think of the flashback, Patrick Klepek?
I think it was pretty good. I was kind of waiting. It's like, how are they going to handle giving us exposition for this character? Because it's so like the character was kind of a blank slate, like in what we have seen so far. So at some point, we need a flashback. We need a conversation. I don't know how they're going to handle this. And this episode is basically that. Like, kind of like, a lot of other things do happen, but like this episode, I think, is doing a lot of the heavy lifting to get this character from one point to another point emotionally, and why they will probably make a bunch of tragic decisions in future episodes that ultimately lead to them probably getting screwed over by Oz at some point. And also, I think it really sells the like monstrosities from the Batman. Like the effects budget is on display here for a show that probably is not going to have a ton of actual like big visual effects. It's a much more grounded show than that, but they really sell the absolute horror of what happened during that sequence in the Batman, especially given the focus in the movie is on what's happening with the Batman and like it's more spectacle, and here it's kind of grounded with a set of characters that we know and we've been following, and I think it really sells some of the tragedy. And obviously, like optically, given everything that's going on, like in Florida with like the hurricane, like it just, I don't know, like all of that, like really kind of came together to really sell that moment for me.
Something I realized, by the way, is I feel like DC spends a lot more time dealing with the tragic outcomes of its movies than MCU does, right? Like, remember Man of Steel, right? I think it was when the big, thing, the little pulsing things came down from the sky and the aliens like killed all the people. I think it was Man of Steel, right?
Yeah, yeah. And there's also have the big fight with Superman's bashing through the buildings and a bunch of them are falling.
Right. And that's why like Batman v Superman like happened was Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne is like, oh my gosh, Superman just like, yes, he saved us in this situation, but you can imagine how if he was against us, it would be terrible.
It's a clever concept. It's like a good connective tissue setup that deals with the consequences of one film as emotional motivation for another.
Then the Flash also deals with that event as well, and so these movies just spend a lot of time like pondering over the consequences, which I like support in general. I think that's and then of course you have this movie. The Batman is dealing with this movie's dealing with the consequence of the Batman. I generally support that as an idea. I also think that the MCU could stand to do with a lot more of that. Like I feel like the MCU basically didn't deal with the snap at all. I know it's referenced. I know it like comes up on TV shows and movies. Like I know people like talk about it, but like if your loved one was gone for 5 years, that would create like traumatic ripples throughout your life.
That should have been like the entire phase.
It could have been an entire
Endgame
phase 5. Could have
was just emotional ripples from the snap. Like,
absolutely, and they never. So I'm gonna say I think like DC leans on it really heavily, and I think MCU doesn't lean on it enough. You know what I mean? That's how I feel about it. But anyway, I think the other thing I like about this intro to episode 3 of The Penguin is the conflict between him and his dad, right? Where Vic asks his dad, like, "Hey, don't you want more out of this life?" And you think like, "Oh, that's Vic being influenced." I thought, because I'm a dummy, I like, "Oh, that's Vic being influenced by the Penguin." No, that was Vic.
You're not a dummy. Deliberately, I think they are like trying to distract you with a shiny object for like, oh, and later you're going thematic overlap. Like, I see what you're doing here.
Well, because like, doesn't he in the first moments he has like this bag? He's like, I gotta go drop this off, and you think it might be something for the Penguin?
Yes,
but it's
that's
actually
that's what I assumed. Yes,
right. So it's a nice head fake there. But anyway. And his dad says, "Hey, like, we already have everything we need. Like, this is great." And it is this. It does point to this concept that I think is going to be core to the show, right? I don't know how well the show's going to land it, but it's core to the show of like, what is America basically, and who does America serve? And I think America instills in people a lot of entitlement and a lot of yearning, and when you are in an immigrant family, as I am, I'll just say like one, I've talked about this before, but I'll say one element of my dad being an immigrant is for 16 years he like owned and managed a Chinese restaurant, which was like very difficult, backbreaking work. Not backbreaking, but like just very physically strenuous work. Stuff is breaking all the time. People are demanding and stuff like that. And now he works at an office desk job. And an office desk job is something that like most people would consider nightmarish. Like they literally make movies about how horrible it is. But for my dad, it's like, this is amazing. This is like, I can like, you're saying I can sit at this one place all day. I don't need to like get up and do it, like, and I think if you're an immigrant, you're coming from like these really challenging circumstances, and even like a basic life in the United States is amazing. And if you're born and raised here, you are trained from a young age to always want more than you have. And so I like that is not just like a throwaway dynamic, but it's clearly, I think, woven into the heart of what the season is. And Penguin talking about what America is and how you always need to strive to get ahead, and the things that he has done to get ahead. So anyway, just wanted to throw a shout out to that part of the intro as well. Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.